let us discuss about the nutrition. The substances required for growth, development and for energy generation, they are called nutrients. The intake of nutrients is called nutrition. Based on the nutrition, the organisms or the animals have been divided into two categories. They are autotrophs and heterotrophs. Autotrophs means, these are, auto means self, trophic means feeding. These are self feeders. So these are green plants. The green plants prepares their own food material by utilizing the solar energy. They are called autotrophs. Whereas the other animals which cannot prepare their food material, they depends on others for their food needs, they are called heterotrophs. Hetero means others, trophic means feeding. So these heterotrophic organisms can be divided into different categories, or the heterotrophic nutritions can be divided into different types. So they may be parasites, symbionts, commensals and saprotrophs. Here parasites. Here parasitism means it is a close relationship between the two organisms in which one organism is benefited and the other organism is harmed. This type of association is called parasitism. Symbionts. It is also an association between the two organisms in which both the organisms are benefited. This is called symbiosis. And commensalism. Here there is no benefit, there is no harm. It is also an association between the two organisms in which both the organisms neither benefited nor harmed. And saprotrophs. So the organisms which depends on dead and decaying organic matters, they are called saprotrophs. So let us discuss about the nutrients. The study of nutrition is called trophology. So nutrients are the substances which are required for growth, development and for energy generation. So based on the quantity, the nutrients are categorized into two types. They are macronutrients and micronutrients. Macronutrients means these nutrients are required in large amounts or large quantity, that is in grams or in kilograms. So micronutrients, they are required in very minute quantity or in small quantities like in milligrams or in micrograms. So example for these macronutrients are, they are carbohydrates, proteins and fats. So example for these micronutrients are vitamins and minerals. So these macronutrients, they are required in large quantities or large amounts. They are mainly meant for energy generation and also for construction of the body organs and metabolism. Whereas the micronutrients, they are not meant for energy production. So they are essential for the proper metabolic activities. So though these micronutrients, they are required in very small quantities, very minute quantities, they involve in the metabolic activities, metabolism. So these micronutrients, so that is vitamins and minerals, they are also called as essential nutrients. Suppose if our diet contains all the nutrients in required amounts, it is called as a balanced diet. So for example, according to dietitians, the daily intake of carbohydrates, proteins and fats will be in the ratio of 60:15:25. So this is considered as a balanced diet. So that means if our diet contains all the nutrients in required amounts, so that is called as a balanced diet. Here complete diet. Complete diet means if the diet contains all the nutrients, both macro as well as micro, it is called complete diet. So the best example for this complete diet is milk. So the milk can be considered as a complete diet because the milk contains the carbohydrate or the sugar, lactose, the protein present in the milk is casein, and the lipid or the fat present in the milk is lactic acid, and the vitamins present in the milk are A, D, E, K and B complex vitamins. Say all the fat soluble vitamins and B complex vitamins except C. And the minerals present in the milk are calcium and iron. So the milk contains all the macro and micronutrients, so it is considered as a complete diet. Let us discuss about the macronutrients. So that is carbohydrates. These carbohydrates are the macronutrients. They are mainly meant for energy generation. They are mainly meant for energy production. So they are the best sources of energy. 1 gram of carbohydrate on oxidation gives 4.2 kilocalories of energy. So it is called its calorific value. The calorific value of carbohydrates is 4.2 kilocalories. The carbohydrates, they contains the elements carbon, hydrogen and oxygen. So carbohydrates are made up of carbon, hydrogen, oxygen elements. The general formula of carbohydrates is CnH2O taken n times. So the monomeric units or the simple form of carbohydrates are called monosaccharides. Simply they are also called as sugars. So mono means single, saccharon means sugar. So the simple form or the monomeric units of these carbohydrates are called monosaccharides or sugars. Based on the number of sugar units, the carbohydrates have been divided into monosaccharides, disaccharides and polysaccharides. Here monosaccharides, mono means single, saccharon means sugar. So these monosaccharides are the simple form of carbohydrates. They are easily soluble in the water and they are sweet to taste. These monosaccharides, based on the type of functional unit, they may be divided into aldoses or ketoses. If the monosaccharide contains CHO, that is aldehyde group as a functional group, they are called aldoses. If they contains CO group, carboxylic group as a functional group, so they are called as ketoses. Let us see some example for these monosaccharides. Glucose. This glucose is commonly called grape sugar. It is also called as blood sugar. So another example is fructose. This fructose is called fruit sugar. It is also called as honey sugar. Galactose. It is called milk sugar. Ribose. It is a component of RNA, that is ribonucleic acid, and deoxyribose, it is a component of DNA, deoxyribonucleic acid. So these are some examples of monosaccharides. So glucose, commonly called grape sugar or blood sugar. Fructose, it is commonly called fruit sugar or honey sugar. Galactose, it is commonly called milk sugar. And ribose, it is a component of RNA, ribonucleic acid. Deoxyribose, it is a component of DNA, deoxyribonucleic acid. Sorry, ribose is a component of RNA, ribonucleic acid. So these monosaccharide units, say this is a monosaccharide and this monosaccharide. So these monosaccharide units are linked by glycosidic bonds. The monosaccharide units are linked by glycosidic bonds to form a chain. They are called polysaccharides. Let us say disaccharides. Here di means two, saccharon means sugars. So the two sugar units are linked by a glycosidic bond, thereby it forms a disaccharide. Some examples for these disaccharides are sucrose. The sucrose is commonly called cane sugar, or it is also called as table sugar. The sucrose is formed of two monosaccharide units like glucose and fructose. So these glucose and fructose, they are linked by a glycosidic bond to form a disaccharide sucrose. The sucrose is digested by a digestive enzyme called sucrase. That means sucrase digests the sucrose to form the respective monosaccharides glucose and fructose. So another example is lactose. So this lactose is commonly called milk sugar. So the lactose contains two monosaccharide units, glucose and galactose. These two monosaccharides, glucose and galactose, they are linked by a glycosidic bond to form lactose sugar. This lactose is digested by a digestive enzyme lactase. So another example is maltose. This maltose is commonly called malt sugar. The maltose is made up of two monosaccharides They are glucose and glucose. So the alpha D glucose and beta D glucose are linked by glycosidic bond to form maltose. The maltose is digested by a digestive enzyme maltase to form the respective monosaccharide units glucose and glucose. So these are the examples for disaccharides. So let us see the polysaccharides. So here poly means many, saccharon means sugars. Many sugar units are linked by glycosidic bonds to form the complex carbohydrates called polysaccharides. So these polysaccharides may be homopolysaccharides or heteropolysaccharides. Here homopolysaccharides contains similar type of monosaccharide units, whereas the heteropolysaccharides contains two or more different types of monosaccharide units linked by glycosidic bonds. Some examples for these polysaccharides are cellulose, starch, glycogen, inulin and chitin. The cellulose, it is a component of cell wall of plants. The cellulose is a component of cell wall of plants. And starch, so the excess of food material, the excess of glucose in the plants is stored in the form of starch. So the starch is considered as reserve food of plants. And starch is also a polymer of glucose. Cellulose is also a polymer of glucose. And glycogen, the excess of carbohydrates in animals can be stored in the form of glycogen. So the glycogen can be considered as the reserve food of animals. So glycogen is the reserve food of animals. Generally in animals, the excess of carbohydrates are stored in the form of glycogen in liver and muscles. Inulin, it is a reserve food material in some tubers like in Dahlia tuberosa. So in Dahlia tuberosa, the carbohydrates are stored in the form of inulin. So this inulin is a polymer of fructose. So many fructose residues, they are linked by glycosidic bond to form inulin. And chitin, the chitin is a polysaccharide. It is a component of cell wall of fungus. The cell wall of fungi and the exoskeleton of insects is made up of chitin. Next one, proteins. These proteins are the macronutrients which are mainly meant for construction of the body organs and tissues, and these proteins are also involved in the metabolism. These proteins participates in metabolism in the form of enzymes, antibodies and also certain hormones. Certain hormones are chemically, they are protein in nature. So the calorific value of these proteins is, that means 1 gram protein on oxidation gives 5.6 kilocalories of energy. The proteins, they contains the elements carbon, hydrogen, oxygen, nitrogen and sulfur. The proteins are made up of carbon, hydrogen, oxygen, nitrogen and sulfur elements. The monomeric units are the simple form of these proteins. They are called amino acids. Amino acids. So these amino acids are linked by the amino acids are linked by peptide bonds to form a chain-like structure. It is called polypeptide. So there are 20 amino acids. These 20 amino acids participates in the formation of proteins. These 20 amino acids which involves in the protein formation, they are called basic amino acids. Nutritionally, the amino acids are divided into